Hello, welcome back to Building Integrity. I'm your host, Josh Porter, and in this video, we're going to be continuing the second part of our two-part series on the Davenport hotel collapse in Iowa. There's a lot of base ground forensic information that is covered in the first video. I will not be recapping a lot of that. So some of the things that I mentioned in this video may be a little confusing. I would really recommend, if you haven't seen the first part, to go back and watch that. Anyway, let's dive in. All right, here we have a CAD drawing of the front elevation of the west face of the building. And we're going to use this as our groundwork for drawing where the building collapsed and mapping our cracks as time goes on from 2020 up until the day of the collapse, and kind of showing you how the thing worsened over time and where there was like an exponential takeoff in how the cracks got worse. A couple of things I want to point out on this real quick is that there are two openings that have no brick in them. We'll cover that later. That's these two. There are two openings that had previous block infill. I should say block, not brick. So that's one of the distinctions I'm going to try to really make on this video, is when I refer to brick, I'm referring to the red brick wall. When I refer to block, I'm referring to cement masonry units, CMU block walls. So these two have CMU in them. And then these two were filled in at some previous point with some unknown material. And the reason why I X them all out is because none of them are structural. So all of the loads from above have to flow down, you know, all the weight of the building, all of the beams. If you recall, there are beams in the walls that go into the building and which support the floors inside. Those beams sit on the wall. There's dozens and dozens of these beams. All of that load has to flow around these X's, and they have to go to what I'm going to refer to as these brick pilaster areas. So I'm referring to these areas right here. So this is bearing, that's bearing, this area is bearing, this area is bearing, this area is bearing, and so on. And it's really important to understand that the brick itself, the red brick wall, which is very thick, it's multiple widths thick, is structural. I'm going to be harping on this many times throughout the video. The brick is structural. The brick is structural. The brick is structural. The only thing that's not structural is the very outer layer of the brick. But the brick wall is about 20 inches thick, with about 4 inches of those being the outer layer, what we call the facade. The facade is not bearing. It's non-structural. But everything else in the brick is structural. This is really important because you'll see that people kind of missed that as they went along. Okay, so let's look at this. So here you can see an aerial photo taken from the drone of the collapse area. And again, I'm just recapping some of the key points. One, you can see it collapsed at this window line, and it broke at this window line here. And this was the first of the double windows down there. And again, keeping yourself oriented, this is like the first window stack, second window stack, and third window stack if you look at it from the corner of the building. So it broke on the fourth window stack. I went ahead and went back to our AutoCAD drawing, and I hatched in the area in brown of the collapse area. And again, you can see first window stack, second window stack, third window stack. So it broke there. And then of course it broke at that double window here. So the brown hatched area is our collapse area that we're going to be talking about. And then what we want to do is kind of zoom in on the ground floor, because most of the work, actually all of the work that was done this year on, quote, repairing this building and in 2020, which is where we're going to start, is all done in this lower, first floor area. And in fact, a lot of the repair work actually takes place over here, but we're going to break all that down for you. All right, so let's start at the beginning of the data that I think is pertinent for this collapse. In August of 2020, this inspector came out and took some photos. We have records of that. And this shows some general conditions of the building. It's a little hard to see what's going on, but you can see there's like missing brick and cracks here at these locations. You can see this is cracked and broken here, and you've got some missing brick up here. And you see this like vertical line. I think that's actually just a water stain. I don't think that's a crack because it doesn't show up in other photos from other angles around this same time period. But I could be wrong on that. All right, so if we take those cracks that I had circled, all these cracks that I had circled, and we map them out, this is sort of the process you have to go through, because what you're looking for is how do things change over time. We're not dealing with a pristine structure that then all of a sudden developed a bunch of cracks. We're dealing with an old structure that had cracks. So what we're trying to understand is, okay, well, what cracks predated this date and what cracks came about after this date. And that will help us kind of piece this all together. Again, this is in 2020. Now, I don't know how much was done, but I do know, the building was painted, because this is all red now with red paint, which, it is a problem because it can trap moisture and stuff in there. But this building's 116 years old, and this wall was only painted for the last 3 years. So you can't, even though it probably exacerbated some of the problem. The reason why it does that is it can trap water in the wall. And then during freeze cycles, the water expands and can break apart the brick over time. Especially, again, remember, the brick is structural, right? Anyway, so here's our crack mapping of those cracks from 2020. Now we fast forward 3 years, and in February 2nd, the building owners called out an engineering firm. The engineering firm went out and looked at the structure and the condition of the structure, and we're going to show you pictures from that same week. But a couple things that I wanted to point out is they have an area that they're concerned about. They're not concerned about the whole west wall. They were called out to look at a certain area of the west wall. And if you remember from video 1, we had those beams coming and bearing on the brick wall. Okay, they bear on the brick wall. The brick wall is structural. There's nothing else in the brick wall. There's no steel columns, steel beams, nothing. All right, so in his report on February 2nd, he wrote, the beam is approximately 16 inches wide and is likely steel encased in concrete. So again, he's talking about one of those floor beams that's coming out towards us and bearing on the brick wall. He says, it is unclear whether it bears on the brick wall directly, which we now know it does. And it really doesn't take a lot of effort to figure this out at all. It is unclear whether it bears on the brick wall directly or rather on a steel column encased in brick. All right. The main key here, though, isn't that he's unclear. That's okay. As an engineer, you can be unclear about things. When you're unclear about things, though, you cannot arrive at a scientific certainty about anything. However, in the very next paragraph, he says, the main takeaway from the inspection is that this damaged area is not an imminent danger to the entire building and its residents. An evacuation, and he goes on to really get specific, an evacuation or lockout of the building is not necessary at this time. Engineers are allowed to have an analysis that's incorrect. You can do the math wrong. You can misunderstand something that's going on, and then you can draw a conclusion from that, which may be the wrong conclusion. We're humans. Humans make mistakes. What I have a problem with, and there's a couple other cases that I will probably be covering over the next couple years, where there are these engineers, these bad actors that, and I'm not saying he's necessarily a bad actor, but this is very questionable. Why would you make an engineering judgment call, an engineering decision, when you're unclear about what's even going on or how the thing is even structurally put together? How do you know that the building and the cracks and the stuff are fine or okay? Well, why don't we look at what he was looking at? This picture was taken 4 days later, but I think it's reasonable to assume that this picture is representative of what he saw on the 2nd. And you can see you've got a large part of the facade that has fallen off, exposing the structural brick behind. You've got a blowout of block here, and you've got a blowout of block here. I mean, you can see that it's like triangular shaped here in this wedge where it's just kicking out. All right, so you've got like this brick blowout here. And then and those areas were here and here that I was just showing you. And then if you look over here, you've got this massive shear crack. All right. And it's this shear crack that I think really was of biggest concern to everybody. But if you go ahead and map all of these things out on the drawings that we're working with, okay, I left the break line. So this right here is the break line of the collapse. And this is the other break line of the collapse. I left that in brown on each of these. So you'll see those on all these drawings. And then I went ahead and mapped out all those cracks. And then again, here's that big shear crack that you see. And that thing looks pretty serious. Like it goes right through the structural brick and everything. That was the thing they were most concerned about in their inspection. So the engineer goes out 6 days later and is taking another look at the building. Okay. And he goes on to say, again, it is unknown. So he still has this level of uncertainty, right? It is unknown if there is a north-south steel beam inside the wall. at the second floor level, or if there is a steel post encased in the brick which supports the encased east-west beam. So again, he's repeating exactly what he said in 2.2 on February 2nd. He doesn't know if there's anything else structural in the brick, or if the brick itself is the only structure he has to work with. So he says in a sentence, which makes sense, which is good, right? It will therefore be conservatively assumed that the east-west beams bear directly on the brick wall to be replaced. Okay, so he made a really good assumption here that he says, I don't know, so let's take the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is that all these beams are sitting on the brick itself, and that's it. That's the only thing supporting the beams. So then he says, okay, well, we need to come up with a design and devise a design to repair all these problem areas. These are pictures taken the very next day of the inside of the building, okay? And again, the inside of the building, the brick does not have a facade. So if you see brick on the inside of the building, you are staring at the structural wall. And you can see how the structural wall is literally just like coming apart in pieces. Let me change my color here. So you can see how it's just coming apart in pieces, right? There's a huge chunk of it, and it's just laying on the ground as a pile of rubble. And this is just a pipe for a waste stack or something like that. This picture here is another area of wall. I'm not exactly sure if this is the corner of the building at the very far corner that did not collapse, but you can see all this brick rubble just laying here. And you can say, you know, oh, well, that's under, you know, whatever this is. Who knows what that is? But it's just plaster on brick. So this is all part of your structural brick wall, and it's just literally just kind of crumbling and falling apart inside the building. This is the beam that he was concerned about in his letter. He's saying, I don't know what this beam sits on. All right, that's what he's saying. He doesn't know if there's a steel column in there, and he doesn't know if there's a steel beam in there that this thing rests on inside the brick. But we're going to assume that it's just sitting on the brick. Well, if you look at this beam, I mean, it has completely sheared the structural brick. And not only did it shear the brick there, and it's kind of sheared it over here, which is normal. We usually see these things flare out in like 45-degree angles. So not only did it shear the brick, but it's actually crushing the brick here. So this thing is like shifting and crushing the mortar in between the brick, which then crushes the brick because the brick can't bear the weight evenly. So he comes up with a design. So this is taken in February 10th, 2023. And he comes up with a design. That photo was 2 days after the design, but that's inconsequential. So the design was done on 2/8, all right? And so he wants to, now this image is looking at that area that we were just looking at. So we're looking at this beam, okay? We're gonna call this beam like A. And if you come over here, this is beam A. So you're standing inside and you're looking at this wall. And he's saying to demo this area first, okay? And he's going to have, and then when you get to these other areas, he wants these columns installed and beams, and we'll go over that whole support detail. But he wants to redo, he's got about 12 feet of wall that he wants to replace. Brick wall, structural brick wall. I'm gonna harp on that. He wants to replace 12 feet of structural brick wall with CMU, concrete masonry units, all right, or cement masonry units. So he wants to replace the wall with modern block. And this is sort of like a demo detail, all right? And then if you look at this like a cross section through the wall area here, he wants to put in these post shores, which are here and here. And then he wants to have a beam, which he refers to as a needle beam, okay? It's a steel beam that will go through the brick. So he wants the brick to be chipped out like a channel, run this steel beam through it. And then he wants to have an angle iron on the inside and outside spanning the beams, and then the angle irons will hold the brick above, is his thought process. The interesting thing is this design, and you can tell this later, especially if you look at the next detail, this design doesn't even he doesn't understand the actual thickness of the wall. So in this design, he's showing a 4-inch by 4-inch angle on each side. And if you look at this scale, you've got about 4 inches here, 4 inches here, and 4 inches here. For those of you out of America, that's like around 10 centimeters, I want to say. All right, so this whole thing he has as roughly drawn as around 12 to 16 inches. The thing is actually about 20 inches wide. Okay, so it's really probably about 44 centimeters, I think. And this thing is much wider than what these brackets can hold up. And again, it's structural. So if you have facade, so he doesn't even really have this drawn correctly because this is facade out here. That's non-structural, right? So if this angle iron is just holding the facade and this angle iron is holding 4 of the remaining 16 inches, then you have 12 inches unsupported of structural wall above. The other thing, that his details have, so this area right here is gonna be new block, but he has 8-inch by 16-inch block that he designed. Okay, so he's gonna be putting in these new CMU blocks, and they don't even cover the whole thickness of the wall. Fortunately, the contractor catches this later, which we'll get to. And then this diagram shows that, okay, as you build the first 4-foot section here, I want you to go ahead and leave this interlacing of the bricks and leave the wire lath so that when you build the next section, they can tee into each other, right? You can kind of tee it into each of these areas. So this is just his detail showing the contractor how to sequence. So they're very decent details. I don't necessarily agree with the methodology at all. Like, I really think these details underline for me a very key point that there's a lack of understanding of how this wall functions for all the floors, right? This is not just carrying just that first floor beam that's shearing and cracking and settling. It's carrying the wall above and the beams above, and the wall above and the beams above, and the wall above, and it's carrying a lot of weight. And so to not take the whole wall into consideration, I mean, you can look at the detail. This whole thing is just the first floor. That's it. There's like no consideration for what's going on above this area. There's also nothing in the details to tell the contractor, okay, when you demo out all of this block as you're moving along, all of the brick, as you demo out the brick and you install the CMU block instead, how are you going to transfer the loads from the old structural brick above to the new CMU block below? All right, so on February 8th, he goes out to the job site. The engineer goes back out to the job site, and he says the repairs are being performed by the contractor. They appear to be going according to plan. One deviation from the plan is that 2 layers / widths of CMU are being installed to replace the clay brick wall segments rather than a single layer with an outer facade layer of clay brick. He doesn't go into reason why, but the reason why is because the wall is so thick, the contractor's like one width of block, 8 inches of CMU block is not enough to support the wall above. It's a 20-inch wall. We need at least 2 layers and then brick. So the engineer's just like, hey, the contractor made this deviation and I approve it. But the reality is the reason why the contractor made the deviation is because the design details originally were inadequate to actually support the structure above, and the contractor caught it. All right, so it goes on to say the original repair area is roughly 12 feet wide and will abut an existing width of CMU, which is likely a previous repair. What has recently come to the attention of the team is that this area has a large void space, roughly 12 inches to 14 inches wide, between the clay brick facade and CMU layer. This void appears to have been caused by the collapse of some mass of clay brick. Well, what is that mass? Is it structural or non-structural? Well, you be the judge. We're going to look at it. Some massive clay brick between the facade and CMU. Okay, so the mass is settling, piling up, and pushing off the facade. Okay, so they're very concerned, this whole project, they're very concerned with facade, the condition of the facade. Here is the picture that he's talking about. This was taken 5 days before the report was written. They took this photo, and on February 23rd, 2023. Now, here is the existing CMU. Okay, so that's existing. And what is all of this up here? That's your structure. I mean, that's structural brick. Because remember, anything that isn't facade, which is right here, okay, this is facade. Anything that's not facade is structural brick. So this is all structural brick. All of this is structural. And it's all completely just crumbling and falling apart. I mean, you can see these huge voids and gaps, and it's a mess. So how is the load above being transferred to anything? When you look at that image up against our crack mapping drawing, okay, I went ahead and added some areas. One, I added from the photos a new area of cracking in the brick, which is right here. So they start doing this project and new cracks show up. This is like really important, right? New cracks above show up. And then the area that they're looking in is this area that I highlighted in, or I hatched out in dark blue, and I've circled there for you. And then this area here in green is where the existing, let me change my color. It's where the existing CMU is. And again, that's the same area here, and it's the same area there. So that's where we're looking at. And when you're looking at this photo, you're looking down and you're looking down, just to give you some perspective. Now, an outside photo further away from this was taken 5 days later as they're continuing work. All right. Now, this I went ahead and drew in the CMU block that they're going to be adding. So they're going to be adding this CMU block right here. I drew that in red, which is unfortunate. It's a little hard to see, but that they're going to be adding block there. But it's not there yet. So what you actually have is this area that's gray that you can see kind of in here. That is that old existing CMU, and it's further in. It's a little bit of an optical illusion in this picture, but that is further in. So you have all of this, which is structural brick. In fact, not only is it structural brick, but it's between this window and that window. Okay, so here's your windows, which obviously windows aren't structural. So you have load coming down this brick, this structural brick from above that is got to transfer somewhere, but we're missing where it can transfer because you have a huge chunk of this structural brick that is missing. The engineer doesn't provide any details for how to deal with that, doesn't provide any instructions for how to make sure that these loads that come from above, let's get a better color, that these loads that come from above are going to properly transfer to that new CMU wall, right? How is that going to transfer? We don't know because there's no details, no instructions, anything to the contractor. He does go ahead and provide a detail, which again goes back to my argument that there seems to be a lack of understanding that the brick is structural. The brick is structural. I'm going to say this 1,000 times in this video. All right, so here's an image showing where the existing CMU wall is, and then in red is where they want to put in new CMU wall. Well, in between, you have this massive void space. In fact, that void space is probably going to be something on the order of about 12 inches because this existing wall here, it's not even under the brick. I mean, look at it. It's next to the brick. It goes to some point above. Who knows, right? But what supports this brick? What's supporting your structural brick? This is the final detail of how it's finally supposed to look when they fix this area. What in the world is supposed to support our structural brick above? According to this detail, nothing. It's just going to float in space. To me, this is really problematic, especially when you consider, okay, this question that I have. Does this, which looks nice and pristine in his hand drawing, facade, you can see the facade here, all right? And you've got your structural brick here, structural, and you got the facade over here. Does that look anything like what you're actually dealing with in the field? This is one of my pet peeves with engineers who, don't and this image, by the way, it was visible. I mean, if you look at the image date is 2/28. And the engineering is 2/28. So this is like literally the same day that the engineering came out is when the photo was taken. And you can see that the one doesn't match the other. This detail is completely, not only is it not a good detail because it's missing, how to support the middle of the structural brick, but it doesn't even account for the fact that there is no structural brick there, that it's all demoed and damaged and whatever. And it's just left up to the contractor to sort of figure it out. Okay. Moving forward, let's talk about, they continue this project. So 5, 6, 7 days later, you're on March 3rd, And you can see they've built the first section of CMU wall that is right here. And they've gone ahead and demoed out. Remember, they were going to do that in 4-foot segments. So they've done 4 feet of brick they've knocked out, and they've built the CMU already in this picture. If we zoom into the top, you can see that here's your steel I-beams, what he referred to as his needle beams, right? And you got another one down here, little I-beam there. Okay, and so these things are holding up these steel angles. So I'm going to delete my drawing there, and you're going to see these steel angles are here. Now, if you remember his detail, he had a 4-inch steel angle on the inside and a 4-inch steel angle on the outside. That gives you 8 inches of bearing support for a 20-inch wall. That leaves 12 inches completely unsupported. This image actually supports that argument. You can see from the face of the steel angle that there is nothing supporting this. In fact, I don't even really, it's hard to tell, but I don't even think I see the steel angle on the outside. It might be this little bit of color here. It's hard to tell with these low resolution photos, but you have this very large gap that's not being supported. Well, no wonder the brick above is just falling apart, because there's nothing supporting it. And the contractor followed the engineer's detail, right? And this is why it's so important to get the details correct. All right, so the project continues. All right, we don't know how they fixed the brick above, but they fixed it somehow. The engineer provides no details for how to transfer the load above to the new CMU block wall. The contractor, you can see all the scaffolding up in these 2 photos. The photo on the left was taken on 4/12. The photo on the right was taken on 4/21. You can see on 4/12, this area here, okay, is the first 4-foot section. These dark spots that you're seeing here and here and here, those are where the block is overhanging so that it can receive the block for the next layer so that they can be interlaced and interwoven together. So ultimately, this section of structural brick wall will be replaced with more of this block. Okay, then you fast forward from 4/12 to 4/21, and you can see that all of this is now block. There's no more brick, no more structural brick in here. And it's very difficult. I don't want to claim that I can tell what the condition of any of this brick is above here from this photo. But again, there's no instruction for how to deal with it. The very next photo we have goes from 4/21, and it jumps about a week and a half to 5/1/2023. So now we're in May 1st, 2023. The contractor has already installed all the new facade brick, and they are pressure washing the building, because you have to pressure wash before you paint it, and they're going to paint it to match the rest of the building. And that's taken on 5/1. Now, in this photo, and I don't show you every photo that the inspector took from 5/1, but in this photo and the other photos that the inspector took, I mapped out the cracks. So this is the new crack map, and this is the new condition. All right. And again, I just want to point out, here is your collapse limits right there and right there. So everything in here collapsed. All right. The red shows where the cracks are mapped out now. The photos do not extend over to here, so I don't have really decent understanding of the condition of cracks over here on 5/1. But the areas also, these 2 areas that are in green, are the areas that they modified. All right, this is a modification. When you take a wood wall and you turn it into a steel wall, you're not just repairing the wall, you are modifying the wall. So in this engineering project they did, this area here was the original 12-foot section that they wanted to do, okay? And don't even ask me for that in centimeters, I don't know. And the segment that they discovered and they went ahead and did while they were out there was this segment right here. So they replaced those. And there's no instruction for how to transfer load. So all this load from this brick pilaster needs to transfer down into your new CMU. But there is a very careful procedure for how to do this. All right. And it starts with getting all of the weight off of the brick. And what this means, and this is really, 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 really important. You have a steel I-beam here, and you had another steel I-beam here. Just remember that in that project, right? But you also had a steel I-beam here, 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 and so on all the way up. And each of these are putting a pretty massive load on the wall, okay? And then never mind the wall weight, the window weight, and all the other weight of the brick and everything else itself, but you've got these point loads on this wall. Now, in order to get, if you're going to demo this section of wall, I don't care if you do it in 4-foot segments, I don't care if you do it in 1-foot segments. If you're going to demo this segment of area of wall, what they did was they put a post shore underneath this beam, and they put a post shore underneath this beam. But they did absolutely nothing with anything above. Like nothing. They didn't get any of the weight off. The way you're supposed to do these projects is you were supposed to post shore from beam to beam all the way up the building. Get all the weight off of the wall. Because what happens is, once you demo the brick and you start building the CMU, between the time when you demo the brick and you put the CMU down, yes, you have a post shore here and here underneath these I-beams, but you have nothing for these upper ones. And so what they need to do is they will find a new path. It's called a load path. And so this will find a new load path, and it will need to go around this area that they're working on. Okay, so all of this load, it would actually look more like this. All this load would flow around this area from above. The only thing the new CMU wall can possibly take is the load from these two I-beams. That's it. Once you start this project and you don't post shore all the way up and get all of the weight off of the brick wall, you have essentially modified the way the forces are flowing in this wall segment. Now consider that they also removed this. So now you got I-beams here as well. You got I-beams here. Okay, and so on throughout the building. And then you've got the wall weight and everything else. So now you have to look at this as a larger non-useful area. None of this is going to really transfer anything from the second floor or above. So that means all the force lines from here, you take the middle, right? You take the center of this thing, and you say, okay, well, these force lines are going to have to flow this way. And they're going to look like that. And then these force lines have to flow around this way. If I'm correct, which according to the engineered details and drawings that we have on hand, there's no reason to not conclude that I'm correct. However, I will state, as I state when I do expert witness work for court, I'm always open to changing my opinion given new information. But based on the information I have, I see no reasonable expectation that any of the forces from the floors 2 and above are going to transfer to the new CMU walls. So they're going to flow around the new CMU walls, and they're going to find a new path. This new path, now you got to imagine this, take this segment right here, okay, of wall. This segment of wall has not seen all of these loads before. This is new to it. So if it was already heavily loaded, it might be overloaded now. Well, you can imagine this is going to cause a lot of stress in the building. And that's exactly what we see. And this is where I'm getting to the point I'm getting to in the video. Now, again, we're on 5/1/2023. And these are, I'll kind of clean this up a little bit, get the force lines out of here. These are the cracks we're dealing with. The day they go to paint, right? These are the cracks we're dealing with. Now, an inspector goes out. The engineer is called back out. What is this? 22 days later. So 22 days after this project is done, the engineer goes back out because things are just, they're looking gnarly. I mean, I'll show you better pictures, but we've got huge blowouts in all of these areas. It just stuff that was not happening before. Okay. All sorts of stress in the building. And in the engineer's report on 5/23, he says, as viewed from the west exterior, there are 2 former window openings, roughly 12 feet tall by 6 feet wide, which appear to have been bricked over some years ago. So he's talking about this opening here and he's talking about that opening there. I know where they're at because I've spent a lot of time with this, so I'm just showing you where they're at. The clay brick facade on and between these openings is bulging outward by several inches and looks poised to fall. So he's talking about all this stuff here, right? And again, he keeps referring to the facade because there's no concern. Nobody's concerned about the structural brick wall, which the facade is intimately tied to. So yes, the facade isn't relied on for bearing, but if the facade is in bad shape, it's probably indicative of something that's going on with the structural wall behind it. But they found what they felt was an easy solution or an easy explanation for the problem. But follow my logic. So he says this. He says, the clay brick facade on and between these openings is bulging outward by several inches and looks poised to fall. He goes on to say, inside the first floor, the drywall is being stripped away. This reveals that the window openings were never filled with brick or block. Rather, the clay brick facade was just run right over the openings unsupported. This lack of bracing helps explain why the facade is currently about to topple outward. Now follow this logic. He's saying this opening right here, that's one of the window openings, and this window opening right here. All right? And I'm going to label these for you. So let's call this A and let's call this B, and then when you go to the inside, you are looking at A and you're looking at B. And he's claiming that because this brick here, all this brick was just simply skinned over an opening and it doesn't have anything to back it, that is why all of this area is bulging. That's their explanation. However, this work, this brickwork here that was done probably, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago. And this wall has never bulged. Never. I mean, look at how it's peeling away from the door frame. This hasn't happened in 30 or 40 years. It doesn't happen until 20 days after they modify the way the west wall is handling and converting loads and transferring loads, I should say. So let's now look at a crack analysis comparison, right? This is where we start getting into the nitty-gritty. In red, so you have these cracks. Remember, I showed you these 3 cracks. This is right after they finished their project on 5/1/2023. You have this amount of cracking. In 22 days, I mapped out from all the pictures, all of the new cracks, bulges, blowouts, everything in purple, okay? So in 22 days, you've got all of this facade falling off. You've got new massive shear cracks. Remember what I told you about how the loads were going to have to transfer around? Okay? And now you got to remember the corner of the building is actually quite strong because it's a corner, and so the brick actually turns. But that's a different story, and it's probably what saved the corner of the building from being part of the collapse is the fact that the corner is stronger than the rest of this west facade. But these force lines have to flow around. And so now you have all of this stress occurring to this area here, this area here, this area here. You have all this stress, and literally the building's just like crushing. Everything looks like it's crushing. It visually looks like it's crushing. And I would argue mathematically, if you were to really consider all of the loads from above, and you got lots of loads, right? Lots of loads that have to transfer down into here. But because all these loads are shifting over, you're now overloading the rest of the building. In some of the photos, you can see that this window over here at the top left of the image actually turns into like a parallelogram because the face is just like drooping down the side. And same thing with this window here, has major deformations. I'll show you in the next picture here. So this window right here, this double window, looking at it from the inside is this picture right here, which the engineer took on 5/23/2023. Now remember, the building collapsed on 5/28, so this is 5 days before the collapse. There's you can't see it, but there's a beam over here, okay, that bears on this wall. This may be a beam or it may just be some sort of chase, I'm not sure. But you can see that this wall is crushing now. After, again, it hasn't crushed for 116 years. But now, what did I say? 20. Oh, so it's the 23rd. So 22 days after they finish their building modification, this wall is now crushing. And this is not, by the way, like barrel distortion from the camera lens or anything. In the report, he even mentions that this wall is bulging this way, because literally what happens is you have the earth pushing back against the building, and a building has to basically crush outwards. So it's crushing outwards outside into the parking lot, and it's also crushing into this window opening. And that same logic goes with this. The corner of this building is where the window is dropping, and then the earth does not want to, it wants to resist. So you end up with this massive curve along the bottom of the window as well. So this is like, you see this, and you see this, where the facade is literally popping off, and you can see it filled with structural brick. Again, everything inside the facade is structural brick. It's all structural. So if you see a giant pile of brick inside your facade, and it's not part of the facade itself, it's your structure crumbling. And I'll prove this. So this is on March 25th, 2023. These photos were taken. So remember, the report was taken March 23rd, and then they go ahead and get a contractor out there literally in 2 days. It's pretty impressive. But these photos were taken by the inspector. But on the same day, the contractor's out there, and he has already infilled those windows. Remember, they found those 2 windows I labeled A and B, and he said, "Oh, well, here's our problem. The brick outside of them, doesn't have anything to stick to. That's why the facade's falling." So they went ahead and installed this CMU block. But look at just look at the rubble pile on the inside. Remember, I told you before at the beginning of this video, if you see piles of brick rubble on the inside of your building, it is structural. There's no facade on the inside. It's structural brick. So the structure is laying on the ground here. Part of the structure is laying on the ground. And I'm almost wondering, if you look at the photo, you can see that they had to use short block here for some of the CMU, and the short block sticks out past the block below a little bit. And it almost appears to me like the contractor may have actually chipped out some of this brick in order to accommodate his block installation there so close to it, to try to get it as tight and intimate as he possibly could. Otherwise, I don't understand the explanation for this giant pile rubble, because you got to remember, this thing had drywall and everything on it concealing it before, so there would have been no real space or volume to store all of this rubble down here. So where did the rubble come from? I don't know. The day of the collapse, this photo was taken by the contractor who was warning everybody that the building looked like it was about to collapse. And you can see in this image, I put the last image up here at the top right. Here's your pile of rubble on the ground, right? We talked about before. And the chunk that it's missing is right here. So I'm going to hatch that. That's where that structural brick is missing from. That is the exact opposite side of this right here. So in the reference photo, which is up here at the top right, which was taken on 5/25, within 3 days, more of this brick. Look at all this brick. This is all structural brick laying out here on the ground. So it's not just like that you have a hole, but you're missing like an entire width or two of brick is just missing off the face of this, what I would refer to as a pilaster, for lack of a better term right now, but this area of structural brick. Okay. Look at the droopy window. I mean, it's so obvious that this building was going to imminently collapse that it's almost crazy that more people didn't heed the warnings of the contractor that was saying that very thing. I mean, he went out there, looked at this thing. He's like, "Listen, I've been a brick mason for however many decades. I'm telling you, you all have a problem. This is structural here, right? You shouldn't have a giant hole in your structural brick. There's a problem." Why did all these problems start appearing, though? Literally, it hasn't appeared for 116 years. That column didn't blow out, right? This column here. It may have been disintegrating, ice and freeze and thaw cycles and water and everything else might have been worsening the situation, but things really accelerated in those last 22 days. Okay, and we're going to go back to this image. Again, you've got a little bit of cracking on the building on 5/1/2023 when they're pressure washing and they're about to paint all of their new brickwork that they put in. They put in new brickwork somewhere around in that area and they painted it. And within 22 days, you have all of this crushing facade failure. You have crushing over here. We know it's crushing because not only do you have this blowout area, which got much worse and bigger, but you have all of these shear cracks occurring, which only would happen if this face is literally dropping. It may have only dropped a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch at the time, but it's enough to say, hey, if my structure is falling even a 1/2 inch, this is really serious. This means we are lacking structural support. We're lacking structural integrity. So what are our takeaways from this analysis? I think one of my first takeaways, and again, this is limited based on the information and data that I have. First takeaway is that there was a failure to account for load transfer in the recent repair designs. And I talked about that a bit before. You have to shore up all the beams for all the floors above before you have to get all of the load off of the wall if you expect your new CMU walls to take that load up. If you do not do that, the load will literally flow around your repair area to the new areas, overload them, and cause the building to collapse. I think the second problem was that there was a failure to recognize imminent collapse warning signs. I think if you go back, and I've spent a lot of time now, hours and hours and hours, studying these photos, studying the drawings, really understanding the sequence of events that happened out there. And I think from months prior, back in February, there was warning signs that things were bad, but not in necessarily imminent collapse, but things were bad. They go and modify this building, and that's like literally the straw that breaks the camel's back. I mean, they shift all the loads to away from those areas that they built the CMU, overload the rest of the building, but the rest of the building did warn you, right? We had the pilaster with the giant hole in it. We had the windows that turned into parallelograms. We had, bowing finishes on the insides of the building. I mean, this wall was literally coming down in slow motion, 1/2 inch at a time over weeks. That's rapid. That's really rapid, right? Plenty of warning signs. And I think there was a failure to recognize those. And then the third thing was that the contractor himself may have caused damage. I don't know, but it looks like he may have caused damage to that one brick pilaster right next to the entry door. So I think when you take all three of these things into consideration, I believe that it was a culmination of these three things that caused this building to partially collapse. Well, I hope you enjoyed this forensic analysis. I wanted to kind of give you an insight into the way my mind works when I'm trying to piece these puzzles together and figure them out. So I kind of went a little long on this video, and I apologize, but hopefully you guys will enjoy it, and I appreciate you watching. In this video, we broke down the problem of the Davenport hotel collapse into its components and analyzed each scientifically. If you are looking for a free and easy way to develop these same analytical skills for yourself, then consider checking out our sponsor, 𝙈𝙞𝙦𝙢. 𝙈𝙞𝙦𝙢 has a 30-day free trial going on right now, so there's no reason why you're not beginning your journey to better STEM skills today. You can use the Brilliant app to learn specific career advancing skills or just to keep your brain sharp like I do. Using the Brilliant app is hands-on and allows you to learn by interacting with puzzles and lessons in an accessible and fun way. You can learn at your own pace, and new content is added all the time to keep you learning for life. Instead of spending endless hours on social media, why not use that time learning something useful? Get ahead of your peers, impress your neighbor, or just learn something new for you. And one of the coolest features, you can gift a subscription to someone else. This is an awesome way to give the gift of learning to a family member or loved one. To try everything that Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days, go to brilliant.org/building-integrity. And the first 200 of you that sign up will get 20% off of your annual premium subscription. Thanks.